In 1962, the CIA and Pentagon drafted a plan to attack American cities. They wanted to hijack planes, they wanted to bomb buildings, they wanted to kill innocent civilians, and they wanted to blame it all on Cuba. The plan was called Operation Northwoods. It was approved by the highest levels of the military. It was presented to the President of the United States. And it would have started a war that could have gone nuclear. This is the story of the most disturbing plan the US government ever made against its own people, and how one man stopped it. The year was 1962. The Cold War was at its peak. In April, the Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, 90 miles from Florida. The United States was terrified. President John F. Kennedy demanded their removal. For 13 days, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. Eventually, a deal was reached. The Soviets removed the missiles, and the crisis ended. But before the crisis, before the missiles, and before the deal, the Pentagon had a different idea. They wanted to invade Cuba, and they needed a reason. A reason that would convince the American people. A reason that would justify war. And they were willing to create that reason themselves. General Lemnitzer was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was the highest-ranking military officer in the United States. And he was obsessed with Cuba. That he believed that Fidel Castro was a Soviet puppet. That he believed that Cuba was a threat to national security. And he believed that the United States needed to invade immediately. The problem was politics. The American people did not want another war, and Kennedy was reluctant to use military force. Lemnitzer needed a way to change their minds. He needed an event that would outrage the public. He needed a casus belli, and he was willing to manufacture one. In March 1962, Lemnitzer and the Joint Chiefs drafted a top-secret memo. It was addressed to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, and it contained a plan that would shock the world. The memo was titled Justification for U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba. It was 15 pages long, and it read like a terrorist manifesto. The plan called for a series of false flag attacks on American targets. These attacks would be staged to look like Cuban aggression, and they would be used to justify an invasion. Here are some of the proposals. Hijack commercial airliners and blame Cuba. Sink American ships in Cuban waters and blame Cuba. Stage terrorist attacks in Miami and Washington and blame Cuba. Bomb American military bases and blame Cuba. Create fake casualty lists of American soldiers and publish them in newspapers. Stage mock funerals for fake victims. And perhaps most disturbing of all, attack American civilians and blame Cuba. The memo stated that casualty lists in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of national indignation. In other words, the deaths of Americans would be a propaganda tool. The plan included specific operational details. For the hijacking scenario, the CIA would charter commercial aircraft from an airline that would be covertly owned by the government. The passengers would be government agents using false identities. The plane would be flown to a secret base. The passengers would disappear, and the plane would be replaced with a drone. The drone would then be blown up over Cuban waters, and the world would believe that Castro had shot down a civilian airliner. For the ship sinking scenario, the Navy would stage an attack on American vessels near Cuba. The ships would be old and expendable. The crews would be evacuated beforehand, and the explosions would be blamed on Cuban torpedo boats. For the terror attacks in Miami, the CIA would recruit Cuban exiles to carry out bombings. These exiles would be working for the CIA without knowing it, and their attacks would be blamed on Castro agents operating inside the United States. But the most disturbing proposal involved the U.S. military base at Guantanamo Bay. The plan called for staged attacks on American personnel at the base. These attacks would include simulated sabotage, simulated riots, and simulated mortar fire. The memo stated that we could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. That we could blow up ammunition inside the base and blame Cuba. We could start riots near the base gate and blame Cuba. And we could sink a boatload of Cuban refugees on the high seas and blame Cuba. The document was explicit about the goal. The desired resultant from the execution of this plan would be to place the United States in the apparent position of suffering defensible grievances from a rash and irresponsible government of Cuba, and to develop an international image of a Cuban threat to peace in the Western Hemisphere. In other words, lie to the world, and use dead Americans as proof. On March 13, 1962, General Lemnitzer presented Operation Northwoods to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. McNamara was horrified. He rejected the plan immediately. and he made sure Kennedy never saw it. But Lemnitzer did not give up. He tried to push the plan through other channels. He lobbied Congress. He pressured the White House. And he continued to advocate for military action against Cuba. In November 1962, Kennedy removed Lemnitzer as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He sent him to Europe as Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. It was a demotion disguised as a promotion. Lemnitzer had planned to kill Americans to start a war, and Kennedy made sure he would never have that power again. Operation Northwoods remained secret for 40 years. The memo was classified top secret and buried in Pentagon archives. In 1997, the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board began declassifying Cold War documents. In 2001, the Northwoods Memo was released to the public. It was published by the National Security Archive at George Washington University. The world finally learned the truth. The highest levels of the U.S. military had planned to attack American citizens, and they had done it with the full knowledge and approval of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The memo was not a draft. It was not a proposal. It was an official document signed by every member of the Joint Chiefs, and it proved that the American government was capable of planning false flag attacks against its own people. After September 11th, conspiracy theorists pointed to Operation Northwoods as proof that the government could plan attacks on its own people. They argued that if the Joint Chiefs could propose hijacking planes and bombing buildings in 1962, they could do it again in 2001. The comparison is misleading. Operation Northwoods was rejected. It never happened. And there is no evidence that 9/11 was an inside job. But the comparison is also understandable. Operation Northwoods proved that government officials could contemplate killing civilians for political goals. It proved that false flag attacks were not just conspiracy theories, they were actual policy options. And it proved that the public could not always trust official narratives. The legacy of Northwoods is not that 9/11 was an inside job. The legacy is that we must always question power, always demand evidence, and never assume that our government would never lie to us. Operation Northwoods was not an isolated incident. Throughout the Cold War, the CIA and military proposed numerous false flag operations. In 1954, the CIA overthrew the government of Guatemala using fake Soviet arms as evidence of communist infiltration. In 1961, the CIA staged the Bay of Pigs invasion using Cuban exiles disguised as freedom fighters. In 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which led to full U.S. involvement in Vietnam, may have involved exaggerated or fabricated reports of North Vietnamese attacks. In 1990, the story of Iraqi soldiers killing Kuwaiti babies in incubators was used to justify the Gulf War. The story was later revealed to be a hoax orchestrated by a PR firm. And in 2003, the claim that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction was used to justify the invasion. The claim was later revealed to be based on faulty intelligence at best and deliberate deception at worst. Operation Northwoods was not unique. It was part of a pattern, and that pattern continues today. The lesson of Operation Northwoods is simple and terrifying. Government officials can plan evil things. They can justify those plans with national security, and they can keep those plans secret for decades. Lemnitzer and the Joint Chiefs were not rogue actors. They were the highest-ranking military officers in the United States. They had sworn an oath to defend the Constitution, and they were willing to kill Americans to start a war. If McNamara had not rejected the plan, if Kennedy had not removed Lemnitzer, and if the memo had not been declassified, we might never have known the truth. Operation Northwoods is a reminder that democracy requires vigilance, IT requires skepticism, and it requires citizens who are willing to question authority. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and Operation Northwoods proves why. Operation Northwoods was never implemented, but it could have been. If one man had not said no, thousands of Americans might have died, and a nuclear war might have begun. The document is now available online. Anyone can read it. Anyone can see the signatures of the Joint Chiefs. And anyone can understand how close we came to a government attack on its own people. In 2001, when the memo was declassified, the National Security Archive called it the most corrupt plan ever created by the U.S. government. It was not hyperbole. It was the truth. Operation Northwoods remains one of the darkest chapters in American history, not because it happened, but because it was planned. And because the people who planned it were never punished. Lemnitzer died in 1988. He was buried with full military honors. he never faced justice for what he proposed, and the American people never received an apology. This was Operation Northwoods, the plan to attack America, and the conspiracy that almost succeeded. Subscribe for the next episode of Forgotten Origins, because history is stranger than fiction, and we are just getting started.